Welcome. My name is Steve Puttrich. I'm an artist along with my wife, Bobby Puttrich. We live here in Arlington Heights. This is our studio. This is where most of the magic happens. Some of the magic happens, I'll say. And both my wife and I are artists. We met back in 1980 in art school at the American Academy of Art. And I saw her in life drawing class and immediately fell in love with her. And it took quite a while for me to work up the nerve to actually ask her questions. And I was painfully shy back then, but it was a match made in heaven, I'll say. We just celebrated 37 years of marriage, and we've raised 3 children. All 3 are creative in their own ways, and they're all married, and we're soon to expect our first grandchild in September. So we're pretty excited about that. After college, I got a job at Parsons Engineering, where I did architectural rendering for about 25 years. Mixed in with 3D modeling and animation and video. I got a pretty good background on visualization and what it takes to tell a story. So I'm grateful for those 35 years at Parsons. The last 10 was more senior management, marketing manager, and vice president of creative services. So within those 10 years, my painting skills and kind of diminished. My wife, in her wisdom, said, "Steve, you're not painting as much. We need to start painting again." So we went out and got plein air equipment, and we started the plein air painting phase. And that was about 2003, I'll say. And we enjoyed the painting. I enjoyed it, painted up, got my skills back, and we've been painting plein air ever since. Most of the art is done in plein air, and I enjoy the plein air painting, being outside in the open air, and being really engaged with the subject matter at hand. So that's...
Well, Steve, let's talk a little bit. I'm Pam Ruschman with the Cedarburg Art Museum. I'm a board member here, and on the exhibits committee. You were our 2017 Best of Show for Cedarburg Plein Air, and that's what made the introduction for your exhibit here, which we're really excited about coming up in a few weeks. So tell us a little bit more about your experience here in Cedarburg and when you painted that Best of Show beautiful piece along the river.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day. I remember it well. It was near the end of the day, about 3 o'clock, and just behind the cultural center of the Cedarburg Cultural Center is the river, Cedarburg River, and there's a set of rapids right there as it turns. That was calling my name to be painted, and I set up right at the corner as the river turned and where the rapids started, and I'm looking north up the river to the mostly the water and the trees surrounding it. And I had the choice between painting it in watercolor or oil, and I chose watercolor. I love watercolor painting. In school and college, I took both oil painting and watercolor painting together, and it was a challenge, but I thoroughly enjoy it, doing both mediums. Watercolor has its own beauty to it, and in that scene in Cedarburg, it was, the watercolor was actually calling out my name, and I didn't have any water with me at the time. So there's a set of stairs just a little bit of ways from there, and I got my water container and scooped up the river water and painted the painting with the river water, actually. So
isn't that a wonderful story? And we're so proud to have that beautiful painting as part of our permanent collection here at the Cedarburg Art Museum.
Thank you.
I also want to mention I was unable to attend the plein air exhibit last year, but seeing your 2 lilac paintings online, I felt like I could actually smell the lilacs. That's how fresh and exciting those 2 paintings were, even online.
Thank you.
And so I think that's a good segue into your exhibit that you're having here.
Yes.
At the Cedarburg Art Museum. So if you want to start talking about some of those beautiful pieces.
Yeah. Well, all of the pieces are florals. I love painting flowers. It's they are God's gift to us, and in all their beauty, shape, form, line, texture, color, fragrance, everything about flowers is just a beautiful subject to paint. If you can paint flowers, you could pretty much virtually paint anything. Because they're so complex, the artist is really challenged to simplify and break it down to its bare shapes. This scene here is of hydrangeas. We love growing hydrangeas in our house. These are the Annabelle hydrangeas we have along the side. And it was one morning, the sun was shining on these flowers, and I just was enamored by the warm light versus the cool shade that these hydrangeas showed. Some of these are also still lives. I'll be bringing up a few still lives of hydrangeas and eucalyptus. This one set up against a dynamic red fabric, and I just kind of cut loose with the colors on this one, the reds, golds, and greens. This one is 3 roses. Again, a still life, kind of an unusual still life where these roses were just laying in the sun on a table, and in plein air fashion, you only have 10-15 minutes to really capture the light. And this was a quick paint, but I thought it captured the moment in the style that I love painting in, which is kind of a thin, thick approach to my art.
Steve, if I could interrupt on that, the rose painting you just showed us here, it almost feels like there's your influence of watercolor on the upper part of it, and thick, beautiful brush strokes on the bottom with oil. So that's very captivating to me. Yeah.
And that kind of brings in my watercolor background, in that I use a thin, transparent underpainting to really set the mood and capture the moment of that's happening in front of me. And this underpainting process happens in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. It's a quick wash, capturing the middle values of color, of values, of temperature. And I use that quick underpainting, very transparent oil paint to set the mood. That sets up in about 20 minutes, and then I'm allowed to paint with the thicker paint on top. It's kind of a fun, fast way of painting that really, I found, captures the mood of the scene. Thank you. This is the watercolor of the lilacs that was done last year at Cedarburg's plein air event. And I did the oil painting, which is coming up in, which is actually right here behind me, that won the award. And then this watercolor, the oil painting was done first in the early morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning. And these lilacs are growing right, or will soon be blooming, right at the pedestrian bridge in downtown Cedarburg, over the pedestrian bridge over the river. And there's this beautiful cluster of lilacs, both white and purple lilacs blooming there on last year's launch day, which was Sunday. And broke out my oils, painted, this painting right here. And I just so fell in love with these lilacs that I had to try it in watercolor. So both paintings will be up in Cedarburg. And I enjoyed these paintings, both these paintings. I think they captured the moment. So
the spirit of plein air, Steve.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is a fun painting. It's a goldenrod in the grove, I call it, and it's a small 9x12 painting. But it's a beautiful setting of the golds and blues and golds that you'll find in nature. It was a dreary, rainy day that my wife and I went out to the grove to paint, and we set up under a gazebo, and this was the scene that was out in the woods, and all of a sudden this beam of light came in and just illuminated the goldenrod, and I had moments to capture that, and this tells a pretty good story of that moment. Another flower that we love growing are moonflowers, and it's a unique flower, kind of like a morning glory, but it's a nice large flower that blooms in the evening. They open up within an hour's time. You can actually see them unraveling, and these little hooks that you see here actually are petals, that the tips of the petals have these little hooks that connect to each other once they're rolled up. And as they unravel, they have this beautiful vanilla scent to them, and they bloom at night. So in the morning, when I wake up, they're fully bloomed, and by 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock, if I'm lucky, they are withered up and died. So they only last for a few hours, and you got to get up early in the morning to paint them. So this was one of the scenes that I'll be bringing up. It's just, I love the interlockingness of these two flowers, kind of joyfully playing together. So,
Steve, if I could ask you a few questions about this painting, it's just stunning. Your use of greens, you have such a profound understanding of obviously warm and cool greens.
yes.
And if you could talk about that a little bit more, and also, are you using a palette knife at all to get those sharp edges on these flowers?
No, this is, I use a palette knife just for mixing paint mostly, but this is all brushwork. And the greens themselves, that's a great question, because many artists struggle with greens, because the color green can be both warm and cool. And the trick to capturing correct greens is, number one, understanding the form at which the object that you're painting is facing, and understanding the warm greens and the cool greens, because a green can go either way, and it's one of those very unique colors. And whether it's a warm green, typically that green shape is facing the sun, and it gets that nice warm glow we love seeing. But also, if it's facing away from the sun, it's reflecting, or actually getting influenced by the blue sky. If it is a warm sun, it's getting in the shadows, in the shade. The sky is a huge influence on that green and cools it off quite nicely. So the trick to understanding greens is knowing which way your form is facing and understanding the warm and cool lights that are in the sky.
Thank you.
Good question. It's another series of moonflowers. I painted this one on oil primed paper. It's a unique piece in that it's using the thin and thick method. I did this in about an hour, and I remember painting it on September 11th. I was kind of moved by, it was September 11th, I think it was like 2012 or something, 2013. But I'm reminded of the Twin Towers, and I saw these flowers, and I just called these my twin flowers on September 11th. And this also shows some good warms and cools in the greens as well as in the whites. And one trick and technique that I'd like to encourage artists to look for is, if you want to capture realistic white, really understand and study grays and the temperature of grays, because if you get the grays right, the whites will really pop.
Steve, this is such an emotional painting. I love it.
Wow.
If we could go back to that, I think this is also a great example of lost and found edges.
Yes.
Just an extraordinary example of that.
Yes. Yeah. It was a moving piece. I was, emotionally thinking about 9/11, of course, but part of watercolor, painting in watercolor, is also allowing things to happen that you may not have planned for. And there's accidents that happen all the time in art when we're making art. And there's a point where you're allowing that accident to happen in orchestra with your plan to create something is I think something very beautiful that the artists experience. So allow those accidents to happen because there's magic in them. There's another moonflower, single moonflower, but here's a good example of the pod that is, a new pod that's starting. And I love the full bloomed one right next to it. It's a good example of the young and old, I'll say, or the young and fruitful. Water lilies are also a favorite subject of mine. We live near the Botanic Gardens, maybe half hour away, and we frequently go there to paint the water lilies. They've got some really good examples of those. I'll be bringing up a few of those as well. This is the oil painting of the lilacs that are up in Cedarburg, and it's I love it when the artists are all up there. Unfortunately, we're not going to have this year, but I hope artists do go up in a few weeks and just paint just for the pleasure of painting. Because Cedarburg is such a beautiful, beautiful town, and I'm going to miss it this year. But again, this is a 12 by 16 painting. Was done in about an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. Quickly done. Again, capturing the moment in that spirit of light and form on those flowers.
Steve, would you say, can you say what your average time is for a plein air piece like this? Obviously, you're chasing the light like we all are.
Right, right. Usually 2 hours. If it's going longer than 2 hours, the light that you're seeing is changing considerably. Usually a morning painting from 9 to 11 is a good time. You can get maybe, you know, to noon if you need to, but then don't take that into the afternoon, because the light is totally different and you're painting a totally new painting. So a morning painting and an afternoon painting is a good plan to have, and that's what I did with the oil painting and then the watercolor for the same subject. This is a quick study painting of a time that Bobby and I went to the Botanic Gardens to paint a river, or not a river, but a flowing hillside of poppies. These poppies were just blooming all over the place at the Botanic Gardens, and I was just enamored by the flow of these colors. So I call it Hillside of Color. This is a cluster of hydrangeas that happened to be at the Morton Arboretum, which is another beautiful place to paint. I did this painting as a demo for a class workshop at the Morton Arboretum, and it just showed a really good example of clustering. The idea of, you don't have to paint every flower in all detail. Find the clusters, the unique clusters and shapes that those flowers reveal, and then occasionally pull a few out and then a few down below in an overall composition. So it just showed a really good example of clustering in work. This is a painting called Serenity. It was done in plein air at Lincoln Park Conservatory in Chicago. It's a beautiful scene. As soon as you enter the conservatory, you see this statue of a little girl looking at a koi pond, and how, you know, the minute you see this, your blood pressure drops 20 points and you are put into a spot of tranquility. It's a beautiful little scene, and if you can get to the Lincoln Park Conservatory, you'll see this scene there. But every time I see it, I'm just reminded of the moment I painted this. It's just a really special moment.
Can you talk to us more about your technique with painting water, which is, I was going to ask you about that too on the lily pad painting, but
okay.
Since we're here, could you walk us through a little bit more of
Yes, water is a beautiful shape when you're painting it, and you have it to paint. It's in this scene, it's very flat and calming. In the Cedarburg painting, at your museum. It's both calming, flat, and had moments of excitement in the rapids. Water itself is a beautiful neutralizer or equalizer of reality. So as if you're painting the real stuff above the water, it's going to reflect differently in different values and different colors within the water. Generally, water will lighten the darks and darken the lights up in reality. So it kind of equalizes out nature, and it reflects it in a different way. So as long as you make that value and color change within your water, it's going to be reflect somewhat real. But I love painting water. This one is got a very unique story to it in that this was done last year up at Cedarburg Park, right behind the Cultural Center. It was done the Saturday of the show. There's a lot of dead time in between after you've delivered the art and the show starting. And I had a few hours of painting time, and I was found at the Cultural Center, but behind the Cultural Center is Cedar Creek Park. And I saw these bridal wreath bushes that you have there, and they were just, again, calling my name, Steve, paint me. And I went there and set up in the shade of another tree, and the light was just dappling these bridal wreaths blooms so well. Behind the bush itself were a group of children. They were playing with their other children, and moms were there protecting their kids. I was pretty quiet, but as children do, they get wind of whatever's happening, and they come around, and curiosity gets the better of them, and they start watching me paint. And I engage with the kids and the mom, and offer them to observe and paint some strokes on the painting itself. And several of the kids put marks on the painting, and I kept those marks on there. They're there if the kids happen to see the show, they'll see their marks. And it was a fun project to do together with the kids. Offered a mini art lesson, impromptu. So I hope this makes it into the show, and I think it'll make it for a good story for the moms and kids to see that. So
Thanks for sharing that, Steve. And what I bet those kids will never forget that experience. That's so special.
It was fun. And that's this painting right here. You'll see at the show.
Well, we are so excited to welcome you and your beautiful work. Can you tell us what's next for you? Do you have a new series that you're working on, or what flowers are you anticipating to paint?
Well, we've got a whole crop of moonflower seeds I planted a few weeks ago, and with all this rain, I'll be painting more moonflowers this fall. We've got a lot of hydrangea plants, and we took the opportunity to plant about 20 tomato plants in our yard. So hopefully I'll be painting some tomatoes as well.
Good. And making some salsa and
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, great.
I will be also participating in the Plein Air South event. I'm on the faculty there down in Florida. That's happening in the beginning of October, or end of September, October timeframe. It's a Plein Air South conference. It's I'll be on their faculty, and then from there I'll head up to Dubuque, Iowa for the Bluff Strokes competition. And right around that same time frame, my daughter's going to give birth. So a lot of fun things.
Congratulations. The year looks bright and colorful for you, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. I have to tell you, I've been looking at your website, and I would encourage everyone listening and watching today to do the same. One of your blog posts really spoke to my heart, where you kind of give your rules for painting, if you could say that. You started with a beautiful Van Gogh sunflower painting.
Okay.
And ended with the Rembrandt Return of the Prodigal Son, which, you know, to me, that's life, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
And you talk about paint faithfully, emotionally, honestly, bravely, confidently, wisely, lovingly. And all of these paintings that you just shared with us, Steve, and the stories and your journey with your lovely wife, that says it all.
Yeah, it does. We do have a blessed life, even in spite of, you know, the hardship that we all have. There's beauty to be seen if we just open our eyes and be grateful. It starts with gratitude. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think all listening will look at moonflowers and lilacs and hydrangeas in a whole new way.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
And we encourage everyone to come to the museum as soon as we open in June. And Steve will be here for a reception on July 18th from 1 to 3. And he will be providing a demo outside where our beer garden is. So it'll be safe and a happy place for all to visit.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.